He handed her the termination letter at her mother's hospital bedside. Not in an office, not through an attorney. At the bedside, while the machines beeped and her mother's hand was still warm inside hers. Nadia Voss, the 37-year-old wife of Marcus Hale and silent majority owner of Cornerstone Architectural Group, the $420 million firm her father had built from a drafting table in a two-room office, did not scream. She did not throw the envelope across the room. She looked at the papers, then at Marcus standing near the doorway in his grey suit with his hands in his pockets, and said one thing, "You chose this room." Marcus did not answer. He had already turned toward the hallway. What Marcus did not know, what he had never bothered to learn in 9 years of marriage, was that the firm he was walking back to, the one with his name on the executive board, the one funding the Meridian Tower project that would make his career untouchable, belonged to the woman he had just handed a termination notice while her dying mother lay 3 feet away. 3 weeks later, Marcus Hale stood under the lights of the Meridian Tower groundbreaking ceremony. Cameras pointed at him. Investors surrounded him. And the woman he believed he had finally removed from his life was standing in the shadows of the same event, holding the building permit that bore her family's seal. Stay until the end, because the woman he fired at her mother's bedside is the same woman who owns the ground he is standing on. Subscribe now, and comment Cornerstone if you believe silence should never be mistaken for surrender. The parking structure of Cornerstone Architectural Group was nearly empty at 5:30 in the morning. Security cameras blinked green above the entrance. The lobby guard, a retired man named Hoss who had worked the overnight shift since Nadia's father ran the company, looked up from his desk when the glass door opened. He did not reach for the sign-in sheet. He simply nodded. Nadia Voss, 37, moved through the lobby in a plain navy coat, low heels, and a worn leather portfolio that had belonged to her father. The badge clipped to her lapel did not say owner. It said consulting review. That was how her parents had structured everything. Her father, Lawrence Voss, had spent 30 years building Cornerstone into one of the most respected independent architecture firms in the country. And in his final years, when illness began to take the steadiness from his hands, he had transferred controlling interest into the Voss family trust, keeping Nadia's name sealed inside private filings where only attorneys and one loyal CFO could see it. To the outside world, Nadia was Marcus Hale's quiet wife, a woman who had left her own career in structural consulting to support her husband's rise. A woman who showed up to company events in simple dresses, smiled at the right people, and never corrected anyone who assumed she was there because of Marcus. Inside the trust documents, she was the majority owner of the firm that paid his salary. The elevator opened on the design floor. The space was dark except for the blue glow of 3 monitors where the overnight drafting team had left their work running. Nadia set her portfolio on the long table near the window and opened the file she had come to fix. Marcus's presentation for the Meridian Tower groundbreaking was due to the investor committee in 4 hours. She had reviewed the draft the evening before while sitting in the hospital waiting room. The opening line had stopped her cold. This project represents the vision of one man who refused to wait for permission. She stared at it for a moment, then she deleted it and typed a new line. This project represents a firm that has spent 30 years proving that the right structure, built honestly, outlasts every storm. Her finger paused over the keyboard. She read the sentence back. It sounded like her father. That was why it was right. The side door opened. Constance Webb, 54, the chief financial officer of Cornerstone Architectural Group and one of 3 people alive who knew the full extent of Nadia's ownership, entered with 2 coffees and the face of a woman who had not slept. Constance had worked for Lawrence Voss for 22 years. She had survived 2 recessions, 3 hostile acquisition attempts, and 1 very bad winter when the firm nearly lost its primary bonding partner. She did not confuse loyalty with convenience. She had stayed because Lawrence Voss had been worth staying for and because she believed his daughter was cut from the same stone. She looked at the open presentation and exhaled slowly. "You know he will take credit for that line too," Constance said. Nadia did not look up. "I am not writing it for him." Constance set a coffee beside her. Those 2 things used to be the same. The room went quiet in the way rooms do when someone says the thing both people have been avoiding. Nadia's hands stopped moving on the keyboard. She had loved Marcus once. Not the version of him that now collected expensive watches and practiced his name signature for press photos. The earlier version. The one she had met at a design conference 11 years ago, when he was a junior associate with a hand-drawn sketchbook and ideas he could barely contain. Back then, he had been hungry and honest and almost humble. That man had stopped showing up somewhere around the time his name first appeared in an architecture trade magazine. The main door opened. Thomas Birch, 63, the Voss family attorney and executor of the trust, entered wearing a charcoal suit and the expression of a man who carried difficult news carefully. He had known Lawrence Voss since before Nadia was born. He had held her father's hand during the trust signing. He had sat with Nadia's mother June through the first round of diagnoses. He placed a sealed envelope on the table. Not the kind lawyers left for routine matters. "Your mother had a difficult night," he said. Nadia already knew. The hospital had called at 3 in the morning. She had sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes before deciding she could still come in. The presentation had to be right. Marcus had left too many gaps in it, and if the investor committee saw those gaps, they would pull funding from a project her father had designed the foundation strategy for 12 years ago. She was protecting Meridian because her father had believed in it, not because Marcus deserved the applause. She pushed the envelopes aside. "Not yet." Thomas's voice was gentle. "Your father wanted you to have it when you were ready." She looked at him. She was never going to feel ready, but she picked up her coffee and kept working. The main doors opened loudly 20 minutes later. Marcus Hale, 42, executive director of design at Cornerstone Architectural Group and Nadia's husband, walked in like the room had been waiting for him. He wore a dark suit, had his phone already to his ear, and carried the easy confidence of a man who had learned to fill space with presence rather than preparation. Behind him came Ro Tanner, 39, Marcus's closest professional ally and head of business development, and a younger man named Sterling Price, 31, who served as Marcus's personal communications manager and had recently been given a cornerstone title that Constance had questioned in 2 separate budget meetings. Marcus ended his call. He saw Nadia. His smile did not warm. "You are not needed in here for the presentation prep," he said, not unkindly, the way someone speaks to a person they have decided to find embarrassing. The room stilled. Constance looked at the table. Thomas did not move. Nadia closed the portfolio. She could have ended the entire conversation with one sentence. She could have told him that the presentation he was about to deliver existed inside a building her family owned, to investors her family had cultivated, on behalf of a project her father had anchored. Instead, she said, "I was just finishing." Marcus turned toward the screen and saw the new opening line. His head tilted slightly. He read it once, then again. Ro looked over his shoulder. "Strong," he said. "That is the right tone for this room." Marcus straightened and accepted it as his own. No one corrected him. Nadia walked out before anyone saw the expression on her face. In the hallway, Thomas caught up to her. She kept walking. "He has no idea," Thomas said quietly. "No," Nadia answered, and he never asked. The hospital corridor smelled like recycled air and disinfectant. Nadia had memorized the walk from the parking structure to room 14C in the way people memorize paths they wish they did not need to know. Past the nurse's station, left at the window, 3rd door on the right. June Voss, 68, lay in the bed near the window, smaller than she had looked 6 months ago. The machines beside her tracked everything with green numbers and soft sounds. Her eyes were open when Nadia came in, and when she saw her daughter, she tried to smile. "Is Marcus coming?" June asked. Nadia sat beside the bed and took her mother's hand. "He has the groundbreaking ceremony," she said. She did not say that she had sent him 3 messages that morning, that the third one had only said, "Please," that he had read it and not answered. June studied her daughter's face the way mothers do when they have learned to read the parts their children try to hide. Then she said quietly, "Do not protect him from his own absence." The words landed somewhere deep and stayed. Nadia looked down at her phone and typed one more message. "Mom asked about you. Even an hour would matter." She watched the message sit unread. Outside the window, the city was waking up. Cranes moved against the skyline where Meridian Tower would eventually rise. Her father had driven her to this exact stretch of street when she was 12 years old and told her that every great building started as a belief before it became a blueprint. She had believed in Marcus that same way once. She had thought love could be a blueprint for something lasting. Her college roommate, Faye Deacon, 37, arrived at noon with a paper bag and the worried eyes of someone who had been watching a slow emergency from the next room. Faye was the one person outside the trust circle who understood how lonely Nadia's marriage had actually become. "You look like you have not eaten since Thursday," Faye said. Nadia stood. "I need to find Marcus." Faye did not ask why. She took the car keys. The pre-event reception for the Meridian groundbreaking was already loud when they arrived. The venue was a glass-walled event space on the 14th floor of the Rennick building, the kind of room that cost more per hour than most people made in a week. Cornerstone's name appeared on every surface. Lawrence Voss's original Meridian blueprints, framed and lit, hung along the back wall like museum pieces. Marcus stood near the center of the room with a glass in his hand, laughing at something Ro had said. He looked comfortable in a way that required no effort. He had the gift of rooms. Then Nadia saw the woman standing close to him, closer than a communications consultant had any professional reason to stand. Isla Crane, 33, was the outside PR strategist Marcus had brought onto the Meridian campaign 3 months ago. She was polished, deliberate, and stood near Marcus with the ease of someone who had already decided where she belonged. Her hand touched his sleeve when she spoke. He leaned toward her when she whispered. Near the photo display, a man Nadia did not recognize lifted his phone. Not toward the framed blueprints, toward Marcus and Isla. Then Isla reached up and smoothed something near Marcus's collar. He did not step back. Nadia stood still long enough to understand what she was seeing. Marcus turned and found her. His expression did not fill with guilt. It filled with irritation, the specific kind reserved for inconvenient truths arriving at inconvenient times. "Why are you here?" he said, his voice low, looking at her the way people look at whether they should have checked before leaving the house. Nadia swallowed the humiliation quietly. "My mother asked about you this morning." Marcus glanced around the room. "I have 100 people here." Faye stepped forward. "Her doctors are not certain she has much time left." Rowe shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Even Sterling looked at the floor. Isla tilted her head and said, "Some men carry responsibilities the people around them will never fully understand." Nadia looked at her, then at Marcus. He said nothing in her defense. That silence told her more than a confession would have. She left without making it a scene. Faye followed her into the elevator, furious enough that she did not trust herself to speak. "You saw that," Faye said, when the doors closed. Nadia nodded. Her voice was almost empty. "I saw enough." Later that night, after Nadia returned to the hospital and sat with her mother through the evening, her phone rang. It was Dominic Hale, 47, the head of Cornerstone's internal compliance division, a quiet, precise man who had been with the firm since Lawrence Voss hired him to build their first formal record system. Dominic was loyal to the firm's foundation, not to whoever currently held the loudest title. "I would not call unless it was serious," he said. Nadia stepped into the hallway. "Tell me." "There are irregularities in the Meridian expense structure," he said. "Luxury accommodations charged to design development. A consulting contract paid to a registered company that appears to exist only on paper. The contractor is linked to Isla Crane." Nadia closed her eyes. "There is also this," Dominic continued. "I recovered deleted communications from the project server. Marcus's access was used to approve overnight building access for Isla on 2 separate occasions. The logs were cleared, but not completely. He sent a secure file through the firm's internal trust channel. The first document showed expense reclassifications approved by Rowe. The second showed a deleted email from Marcus to Sterling. "By the time anyone questions the numbers, Meridian will be finished, and nobody will care about old invoices." Nadia did not cry. She read everything twice, not because she wanted to suffer, but because she needed to stop making excuses. Faye stood beside her. "Are you going to confront him?" Nadia looked through the hospital corridor window toward her mother's room. "Not tonight," she said. "Tonight I am still someone's daughter." By dawn, June Voss's breathing had become shallow and uneven. Nadia held her mother's hand through the morning. The machines kept their count. A nurse came and went. Thomas arrived around 7 and stood near the door with his hat in his hands. June Voss passed quietly at 9:14. Nadia sat beside the empty bed for a long time after. She did not move when the hospital staff came in gently. She did not reach for her phone. She only held the space where her mother's hand had been. Marcus's unread message sat on his phone in a hotel room across the city, beside Isla's empty champagne glass. Some betrayals do not arrive loudly. Some wait until you have nothing left to use as armor. The morning of the burial was cold in the way October mornings in that city could be, the kind of cold that got inside the coat and stayed. A single casket sat over the open ground beneath an oak tree at the edge of the cemetery. White lilies ran along the base of it. Her mother had always said roses were too expected for someone who had spent her life building things meant to last. Nadia stood beside the grave in a black dress that was too light for the temperature. Her father's old wristwatch sat beneath her cuff. Her mother's small gold brooch was pinned to the inside of her lapel where only she could feel it. Faye held the umbrella. Nadia's hands would not stay steady enough. Thomas stood 2 steps behind her, his jaw tight, his grief pressed into the lines around his eyes. He had known June for 40 years. He was not performing sorrow. He was surviving it. Constance stood further back in the row of mourners, composed in the way people are composed when they know their composure is the only thing holding someone else together. Dominic stood near a stone path at the edge of the crowd. He had not been asked to come. He came because Lawrence Voss had taught him that loyalty showed up even when it was not required. The officiant spoke about devotion, about building a life so honestly that the people inside it never had to wonder if they were safe. Nadia heard fragments. She kept seeing her mother's face. She kept feeling the warmth leaving her hand. A car door closed. The sound cut through the ceremony like something dropped on a marble floor. Marcus was late. He crossed the wet grass in a dark coat, his face arranged into the appropriate expression, the kind of sadness designed to be visible from a distance. Rowe followed him. Sterling walked 2 steps behind. Then the passenger door of the car opened again. Isla stepped out. She wore black. Her coat was fitted. Her expression was perfectly calibrated between sympathy and presence. She walked behind Marcus without any apparent hesitation. Sterling glanced once at Nadia and looked away. Isla did not belong here. She came anyway. That told Nadia everything about the calculation behind it. During the reading, Marcus stood closer to Isla than to his wife. That distance became a statement before he said a single word. When the service ended and the mourners began to drift away with their soft condolences, Nadia stayed. She looked down at the fresh soil and whispered something only she could hear. "I tried to love him the way you taught me. I tried to believe the best of him." Footsteps on the wet grass. Marcus stopped beside her, but not close enough to touch. His voice did not sound like grief. It sounded like logistics. He held out an envelope. For one moment, some foolish piece of her still hoped it might be an apology. Some old reflex reached for the man he used to be. Then he said, "I waited until after the service because I did not want a scene." The world narrowed. She opened the envelope. Inside were divorce papers, dated 11 days earlier. 11 days earlier, while her mother was declining, while Nadia had been sleeping in hospital chairs and writing Marcus messages that went unanswered, he had been meeting with an attorney. She looked up. Her voice came out smaller than she expected. "You chose today." Marcus's expression hardened in the way expressions do when someone finds another person's pain inconvenient. "Today makes sense," he said. "There's nothing keeping me here anymore. Your mother is gone. Your father is gone. There's no family left for me to feel obligated to." Faye moved forward so quickly, her umbrella tilted. Rose said, "Marcus, maybe not like this." Sterling said nothing, but he did not step from Marcus. Then Isla moved. She stepped beside Marcus, not behind him. Her hand rested on his arm. The message was not subtle. "Some women," Isla said, "are built for quiet rooms. Some men outgrow quiet rooms." Nadia looked at her, then at Marcus. He let the sentence stand. She looked down at the grave of the woman who had told her, more than once, that a person who needed you to be smaller was not someone worth becoming smaller. For the anger did not arrive first. Something else left first. Quietly, without performance, Nadia removed her wedding ring. Her hand shook once. Then it steadied. She closed the ring in her palm. "After today," she said, "you will never have to pretend I was holding you back." Marcus mistook the calm for defeat. Isla moved her hand to his elbow. Together they walked back to the car. Rowe followed after a pause. Sterling followed without one. Nadia watched the car pull away. She did not call after it. She did not move. Dominic, near the stone path, had his phone low in his hand. He had recorded what he had just witnessed, because Isla had been recording on her own device, and because Marcus had made statements in front of witnesses at a burial that would need to be preserved accurately before anyone had the chance to revise them. Thomas stepped beside Nadia. He reached into his coat and brought out a sealed envelope, worn at the edges, written in her father's handwriting. He had been carrying it for 6 months. "Open when someone tries to use your silence against you," it said on the front. Nadia did not open it there. She held it against her chest, standing between the grave and the grey sky, while the oak tree dripped quietly above her. Faye looked at Constance, and then she looked at Nadia, and she understood that something much larger than a marriage had just shifted. Inside the back seat of Thomas's car, with cemetery grass still on the bottom of her heels, Nadia opened her father's letter. The first line was written in Lawrence Voss's careful, precise hand. "If someone ever uses the day of your greatest sorrow to strip you of your dignity, do not respond with sorrow. Respond with structure." She read it twice. The rest of the letter continued in the same voice, the voice that had once explained load-bearing calculations to her using a dinner table and 2 forks. The voice that had told her, when she was 19 and had just failed her first licensing exam, that every structure that holds weight has been tested past its limit at least once. "My dear Nadia," the letter said, "do not punish a person for choosing to leave. People are allowed to leave. But if that person used the firm your grandfather started, the clients I built trust with over 30 years, the resources of a company that was never his to leverage, if he used any of that to harm someone else along the way, then correcting it is not revenge. It is maintenance. It is what honest builders do." Faye was crying quietly near the other window. Nadia was not, because the pain had moved somewhere past where tears could reach it. The letter continued. "Cornerstone was never a monument to our name. It was a shelter for people whose work deserved protection. I have seen ideas stolen from young architects who did not have lawyers in the room. I have seen credit pulled from people who spent years on the foundation while someone else arrived for the ribbon cutting. If anyone ever turns that shelter into a tool for that kind of theft, stop them. Even if you once loved them, especially if you once loved them." Nadia closed the letter. Through the window, the city passed in grey and amber. That night they went to Cornerstone. The building was different after midnight, quieter in a way that felt attentive. The gold letters above the entrance caught the streetlight. The lobby was empty except for Hoss at his desk, who nodded once and did not ask for sign-in. In the main conference room, Constance had laid out 3 months of financial records. Dominic stood at the presentation screen. Faye sat close to Nadia. Thomas placed a recorder and 2 sealed folders on the table. Constance began. Luxury hotel expenses charged to the Meridian Design Development budget. Guest name on each invoice, Isla Crane. A consulting contract paid to a company incorporated 4 months ago with no prior project history. The principal on that company traces back to a name connected to Isla. Sterling processed the approvals. Dominic continued. There is more. I found deleted files in the project server. Recovered partial communications. Marcus's credentials used to grant after-hours building access. Isla present in restricted blueprint storage on 2 separate nights. Rose signed the override forms. He pulled up the recovered footage. Grainy, corner angle, but clear enough. Isla in the restricted corridor. Row at the access panel at 11:47. Marcus's badge confirmation 2 minutes later. Thomas looked at the screen for a long moment. This is not personal anymore. This is institutional misconduct. Nadia nodded. Then Dominic hesitated before opening the next file. There is one more issue, he said. It may matter most. He turned the screen toward a side door. A young man appeared. He stood in the hallway holding a cardboard portfolio flat against his chest like something fragile. His jacket was slightly too large. His expression was the expression of someone who had been rehearsing courage for a week. Nadia already knew him. She had seen him at a firm reception 3 months ago, trying and failing to reach Marcus near the blueprint display wall. She had noticed the look on his face when Rowe had stepped in front of him. Dominic introduced him. This is Owen Marsh. Owen Marsh, 28, junior architectural designer and original concept author of the structural identity framework that formed the core of the Meridian Tower proposal, stepped inside. He set his portfolio on the table carefully. His voice was quiet. You said someone was willing to hear the original record. Thomas pulled out a chair. Owen sat. He opened the portfolio. Inside were dated sketches, email threads, time-stamped concept documents, and a registration receipt showing he had filed the structural identity concept with the firm's internal project archive 14 months before the Meridian proposal was submitted under Marcus's name. Marcus told me he wanted to develop my concept with me, Owen said. He said it was too raw for the committee, but that he saw something in it. He invited me to 4 meetings, then 3, then 1, then none. When the Meridian proposal appeared in the firm-wide announcement, I saw my structure, different skin, same bones. Dominic placed 2 documents side by side on the screen. Owen's original framework, the Meridian submission. The similarities were not decorative. The load distribution logic, the cantilever approach on the north face, the below-grade integration model. These were not coincidences of style. They were the same decisions. When I raised it, Owen said, Rowe told me I should be grateful for a research mention in the appendix. He said people in my position did not get second chances to be near something this visible. The room went still. Nadia felt something move inside her that was quieter and deeper than anger. Her father had built Cornerstone specifically because he had watched a young structural engineer lose credit on a project that bore his method but not his name. That had been the beginning. That had been the whole reason. For a moment she was not in the conference room. She was 12 years old, sitting on a stool in her father's office, listening to him talk on the phone with a young woman whose design had been absorbed into a larger firm's portfolio without attribution. Her father had spent his entire afternoon on that call. Afterward, he had come and sat beside Nadia and said, when someone takes away a person's work without permission, they are not just taking money. They are taking proof that person was here. Back in the conference room, Owen was looking at his hands. I stopped fighting it, he said. I told myself this was how the industry worked. I told myself people like Marcus always won. Nadia walked around the table and sat across from him. No, she said. They only win in rooms with no one watching the door. Owen looked at her, uncertain. Nadia placed her hand flat on his original sketches. My father would have wanted these protected. She did not explain more than that. But Constance understood. Thomas understood. Dominic understood. And Owen, though he did not yet know the full truth, heard something in her voice that made him believe the walls around him belonged to someone he could trust. Thomas outlined the path. We freeze Marcus's sensitive to project access without alerting him. We verify every document in this room against firm records. We preserve the originals. We take statements. We prepare formal notices. We let him attend the groundbreaking. Faye looked up. You are still letting him go. Thomas nodded. If we cancel now, he becomes the wronged party. A man targeted by a grieving, bitter wife during a divorce. He gets the sympathy, he gets the cover. Nadia looked at the dark screen behind the financial records. Let him walk in, she said. Let the room fill. Investors, press, board members, every person whose trust he borrowed without permission. Constance said softly, then we let the structure speak. Nadia looked at the signed authorizations in front of her. Let him stand at the height first. People understand a collapse better when they have seen what was built on top of nothing. No one smiled, because this was not a celebration. It was architecture, and good architecture started by exposing every fault in the ground before anything else went up. The Meridian Tower groundbreaking ceremony was the kind of event that generated its own momentum. Photographers arrived early. 3 local news cameras set up along the perimeter. The investor committee had flown in from 2 cities. The city planning commissioner sent a representative. Cornerstone employees in their firm lanyards stood along the sides of the pavilion, genuinely proud of a project most of them had worked on for years. Marcus arrived to applause. He walked the red marker line at the edge of the ceremonial site with the ease of someone who had rehearsed the moment privately. Isla stood near the press line in a cream blazer, managing optics the way she always managed them, deciding which angle made the story clean. Rose stood close enough to be seen. Sterling held a tablet and a backup microphone. Orion Beale, 55, a board member who had been attempting for 2 years to shift the firm's governance structure away from the trust and toward an executive model that would benefit people like Marcus and himself, watched from the VIP section with a careful smile. Nadia arrived through the side entrance. No press noticed. She wore a black coat, simple and still, her father's watch under her sleeve, her mother's brooch against her lapel, invisible to everyone but her. Thomas walked beside her. Constance followed with a tablet. Faye stayed close. Dominic was near the technical access point, his phone quiet in his hand. Owen stood at the edge of the pavilion near a support column, holding his portfolio he had almost left twice that morning. He had texted Nadia at 7:42 and said, "I do not think I can do this." She had replied, "I know. Come anyway." He came. Inside the main pavilion, the ceremony began. The event coordinator introduced Marcus at the podium. Applause rose through the space, and Marcus let it last. "What we are doing here today," Marcus said, "is not just breaking ground. It is proof that vision matters more than permission, that the people who build the future do not wait to be invited into it." In the press row, a journalist typed the sentence into her phone. It had the rhythm of a quote worth keeping. Owen's hands tightened at the edge of his portfolio. The sentence was close enough to something Marcus had said in their second meeting, almost verbatim, when Owen had first explained the concept behind the structural identity model. Marcus had leaned across the conference table then and said, "This is it. This is the kind of thinking that does not wait for permission." Owen had thought Marcus was talking about the work. He had not understood yet that Marcus was talking about himself. At the podium, Marcus looked out over the crowd. "And I want to thank," he said, "the team that helped shape this project into what it became." He paused, especially Isla Crane, whose vision helped carry this across the finish line. A murmur moved through the press row. Several investors exchanged glances. Cornerstone employees, who had spent 14 months on the Meridian structural model, looked at each other without speaking. Nadia stood near a side pillar. She absorbed the sentence the way a building absorbs load, quietly, through its foundation. In the technical booth, Thomas stood beside Sonic. The authorization code waited on the screen. Dominic would not proceed without Nadia's signal. His phone buzzed once, a text from Nadia. "Begin." Thomas entered the code. Dominic confirmed the board authorization. The ceremony screen, which had been showing the Meridian renderings in a slow rotation, went dark. Marcus paused mid-sentence. The Cornerstone Architectural Group seal appeared on the screen. Not the event logo, the firm's formal legal and governance mark. Isla looked up. Orion stopped breathing for a moment. On the screen, the first words appeared. "Before the groundbreaking proceeds, Cornerstone Architectural Group is required to address verified irregularities connected to this project's development." The pavilion went silent. The first document hit the screen without music, without narration. Just a clean, archived firm record, official seal in the corner. A hotel expense charged to Meridian's design development budget. Guest name Isla Crane. Category, creative consultation amount. 4 nights, 2 cities. The whispers started in the press row. The next document appeared. A consulting contract paid to a company incorporated 4 months into the project, no prior history. Principal registration linking to a name connected to Isla Crane. Then Rose approval signatures on the override forms. Then Sterling's expense reclassifications. Then the recovered communications, deleted, partially reconstructed. Marcus's name beside the timestamps. Rose stood up halfway, his chair scraped. Dominic near the aisle raised 2 fingers. 2 firm security officers stepped quietly beside Rose. No shouting. No visible confrontation. Just two calm men and a sealed envelope. Rose sat back down. The screen changed. A title appeared. Original concept documentation. The Meridian Structural Identity Framework. Owen, standing near the support column, went very still. Side by side on the screen appeared two documents. Owen's original framework, dated and registered 14 months prior. The Meridian proposal is submitted. The load distribution logic, the cantilever sequence, the below-grade model. Lines from Owen's original commentary appearing in the proposal's technical notes with attribution removed. Then the emails. Marcus promising mentorship. Rose message to Sterling about keeping the kid in the appendix. Marcus's reply, he should be grateful to have his name in the same folder. People turned toward Marcus, not with admiration, with the particular look that appears on faces when they are recalibrating something they believed. Kellen, standing near the exit, tried to move toward it. A firm security officer handed him a legal notice before he reached the door. Marcus found his voice. This is not authorized. You cannot do this. The next slide appeared. This presentation has been authorized by the Cornerstone Architectural Group Legal Committee, Ethics Committee, and Controlling Ownership Authority. All records shown are preserved under legal hold. Then the formal notices listed on screen. Marcus Hale, executive suspension, project access termination, expense recovery review, intellectual property investigation, Road Tanner, financial misconduct review, Sterling Price, expense manipulation review, Isla Crane, unauthorized access and fraudulent contract review, Orion Beale, governance interference and unauthorized document access review. Orion went grey in his seat. Lenora Quill, the independent board member who had served Cornerstone since Lawrence Voss's tenure, placed her hand flat on the table in front of Orion and did not look at him. Then the screen shifted. A recovered audio clip played from the deleted server files. Interior space, quiet, two voices. Voice came through clearly. By the time she asked questions, he said, she will be too deep in hospital visits and grief to follow the numbers. The pavilion did not breathe. Then another clip. The cemetery. Wet grass. A car door. Marcus's voice again. There is nothing keeping me here anymore. Your mother is gone. Your father is gone. A woman in the press row whispered at the burial. No one confirmed it. The confirmation was already on the screen. A still image appeared. Nadia, at the graveside. Marcus holding the divorce envelope. Isla standing beside him in funeral black, one hand on his arm. Then Marcus's voice again. Some women are built for quiet rooms. Isla lowered her head. The same cameras she had dressed for were now facing her. Marcus stepped away from the podium. Turn it off, he said. No one moved. He looked toward the technical booth. Turn it off. The final slide appeared. Cornerstone Architectural Group, Controlling Trust. Voss Family Trust. Majority owner and active principal. Nadia Voss. The silence afterward was different. It was not shock anymore. It was the sound of a room recognizing something it should have seen. Slowly, people turned toward the side of the pavilion. Marcus turned too, and for the first time since the funeral he looked at his wife and saw not the woman he had decided she was, but the room standing behind her. Thomas beside her. Constance with her tablet. Dominic watching the exits. Faye standing close. Owen upright and steady. Marcus's mouth opened. No, he said quietly, like the word was a door he was trying to close. Nadia stepped out from beside the pillar. No dramatic entrance, no spotlight. She walked down the side aisle and people moved without being asked. She did not stop beside Marcus. She stopped beside Owen. That single choice said everything the screen had not. She looked at the crowd. My father built Cornerstone to protect work from people powerful enough to take it without asking. Today, the firm is taking formal action to correct misconduct connected to this project. The Meridian groundbreaking is suspended pending full review of authorship, expenses, and executive approvals. She paused. This project will not move forward under false credit. Owen Marsh is recognized as the originating author of the structural identity framework at the core of this design. The firm will not proceed until that is corrected on the record. She looked at Marcus. You own this, he said. The words came out like something had collapsed inside them. Nadia met his eyes. I protected it, she said. There is a difference. His face twisted. You never told me. You never asked who I was, she said. You decided what I was worth and stopped there. Isla stood suddenly. He told me she was nobody. The words left before she could stop them. A reporter's camera caught the sentence. Sterling looked at the ground. Thomas stepped forward and handed Marcus a sealed envelope. Executive access suspended pending investigation, Thomas said. Outside counsel will contact your attorney regarding expense recovery, credit disputes, and the intellectual property findings. Then additional envelopes. Rowe, Sterling, Isla, Orion. Each one was quiet. Each one was heavier than any applause. Marcus looked at Nadia one more time. His voice dropped. We can still talk about this. She heard the old reflex in his voice. The door he thought was still open. You chose the day of my mother's burial, she said. The whole pavilion knew what day she meant. She turned away from him and looked at Owen. Cornerstone Architectural Group recognizes Owen Marsh as the structural originating author of this project. His work will be attributed correctly before this project moves an inch further. Owen covered his mouth with one hand. Applause began in the back rows, not immediately, not loudly at first. One person, then three, then a row, then the entire pavilion rising not for Marcus, not for the ceremony they had expected, but for the young architect who had spent 14 months watching someone else stand at the top of his work, and for the woman who had finally stepped into her own name in the building her family spent a lifetime making strong. Marcus stood in the applause he had planned for himself, undone by the room he had spent years trying to own. The weeks that followed were not clean or fast. They rarely are when the truth is structural. First came the suspension notices, then the formal filings, then the corrected attribution documentation for the Meridian project, submitted to the City Planning Commission with Owen's name in the authorship line where it had always belonged. Marcus's press profile went quiet. Isla's firm contract was terminated. Sterling resigned before the audit finished. Rose access was revoked pending the expense investigation. Orion was removed from the board by a vote of 7-2, Lenora abstaining to make a separate statement on the record. And Nadia. The first morning she did not use the side entrance. Hoss was already at the desk when she pushed through the main doors. He stood up, not because protocol required it, because he had worked in that building long enough to know when someone was walking through the right door for the first time. She crossed the lobby beneath the original Voss letterhead mounted above the reception wall, the one with her father's signature still on it. She wore a simple black dress, her mother's brooch against her lapel, her father's watch on her wrist, and no other announcement. At the first board meeting under her active chairmanship, Owen sat across from her with a revised contract and a look on his face that was still not entirely sure the room was safe. She understood that. Trust rebuilt slowly. It had to. After the meeting, she went alone to the private drafting room on the top floor, the one her father had kept locked after his hands stopped being reliable enough for drawing. She turned on the lights, the long table, the empty shelves, the one-framed blueprint on the wall, the first building Cornerstone had ever designed. A small community library in a town most people had never heard of. Her father had kept it there because the building was still standing, because sometimes the most important structures were the ones nobody photographed. Nadia touched the frame. I answered with structure, she said, the way you taught me. The room held the silence the way good buildings hold weight, evenly, without pretending it was not heavy. Some betrayals do not break a quiet woman, they only reveal what she was quietly holding all along. Subscribe for more stories like this, and comment Cornerstone if you believe the people who build the foundation deserve to be remembered in the walls.